My family skipped my wedding for a free cruise. I filled their empty chairs with the people who actually showed up and posted one photo. I'm Marisol, 34 years old, and I work as a large animal veterinarian in a small town in Montana, the kind of place where the nearest hospital is 40 minutes away and half my patients are cows. I want to tell you about my wedding day because for a long time I thought it was the worst day of my life, and it took me almost a year to understand that it was actually one of the best. My parents, Frank and Denise, live in Arizona in a retirement community with a golf course and a clubhouse and a very active social calendar. They raised me and my two younger brothers Tyler and Josh in a regular middle-class house outside Phoenix, and for most of my childhood things were normal enough. Not perfect but normal. It was only after I moved away for veterinary school and later for work, that I started to notice a pattern I hadn't seen clearly while I was still living close by. My parents loved a good deal more than they loved almost anything else. A free upgrade. A discount. A giveaway. A contest. It was practically a hobby for them. Entering sweepstakes and loyalty programs and email lists for chances to win trips, gift cards, cruises, anything with the word free attached to it. For most of my life that quirk was harmless, even a little funny. My mother would call me excited about winning a year's supply of laundry detergent. My father once drove 6 hours round trip to claim a free set of tires he'd won in a raffle at a hardware store, just to save the shipping fee. It was who they were and I loved them for it, mostly the way you love the strange habits of people who raised you. I didn't understand how deep that habit actually ran until the year I got engaged. I met my husband Eli at a veterinary conference in Denver 3 years before the wedding. He works in agricultural equipment sales, spends half his life driving between farms across 3 states, and the first time we talked at a hotel bar after a long day of conference panels, we ended up talking until nearly 2 in the morning about nothing important at all. His childhood dog, my worst calving story, the strange fact that neither of us had ever been to Disneyland. It felt easy in a way very few things in my life had ever felt easy. 2 years later he proposed on a Tuesday evening in our kitchen, no elaborate plan, just down on one knee while I was still wearing my barn boots, and I said yes before he'd even finished the sentence. We planned a wedding for the following October, a modest outdoor ceremony at a ranch about 20 minutes outside of town, string lights in the trees, folding chairs on the grass, food from the diner where Eli and I had our first real date. Nothing fancy. Just what we could afford and what felt like us. I called my parents the day Eli proposed, practically breathless with excitement. My mother screamed into the phone loud enough that I had to hold it away from my ear. My father got on the line and told me in his own quiet way that he was proud of me. For a few months after that, everything felt normal. My mother asked about colors and flowers. My father asked when he should start looking at flights. Then about 5 months before the wedding my mother called with different news. "You are not going to believe this," she said, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. "We won a trip. An actual real trip. 7 days on a cruise ship, all expenses paid, through this travel rewards program your father's been doing for years. First-class cabin. Private excursions. The whole thing, Marisol. Completely free." I congratulated her, genuinely happy for them, the way you're happy when someone you love gets something nice. "There's just one thing," she continued, and I could hear the shift in her voice, the careful, apologetic tone she used whenever she was about to ask for something she already suspected I wouldn't like. "The dates. It's the only week the cruise line offers this particular route and she paused. "It's the same week as your wedding." I remember standing very still in my kitchen when she said that, the phone pressed to my ear waiting for the rest of the sentence, the part where she said, "Of course, obviously we'll pick a different trip, we wouldn't miss your wedding for the world." That sentence never came. "We were thinking," my mother said instead, "that maybe you and Eli could consider a different date. I know it's a big ask, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of trip, Marisol. It would cost thousands of dollars if we tried to book it ourselves. We may never get another chance like this." I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, and for a moment I genuinely could not find any words at all. "Mom," I finally said, "the venue is booked. The caterer is booked. Eli's whole family has already requested time off work. We can't just move the wedding because you won a cruise." There was a long pause on the other end. "Well," my mother said, her voice growing slightly cooler, "I'm not sure we can pass this up, honey. Let me talk to your father." I hung up the phone that night feeling a strange, hollow kind of confusion, the kind you feel when something doesn't add up but you can't quite name why yet. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, that surely once they really thought it through they would choose my wedding. I told Eli about the call and he just shook his head slowly and said, "I hope you're right," in a tone that suggested he already suspected I wasn't. Over the following weeks, my mother brought the cruise up again in almost every phone call, always in the same excited voice, showing me photos of the ship's dining room, the excursions in different ports, the adults-only pool deck. She never said outright that they had decided not to come. She just kept talking about the cruise as if it were already settled, as if my wedding were the flexible plan and the free vacation were the fixed one. I called my brother Tyler at one point, hoping for some clarity, some sign that I was misreading the whole situation. "Yeah," Tyler said, sounding uncomfortable. "Mom and Dad are going on the cruise. I think they already booked the flights to the port." "During my wedding week?" I asked, my voice tight. "I mean, yeah," Tyler said again, like it wasn't a big deal, like I was the one being unreasonable for even asking. "It's a really good deal, Mari. You know how they get about stuff like this." "It's my wedding, Tyler." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry. I really am. But you know how they are." I did know how they were. That was exactly the problem. I had spent my whole life quietly absorbing the fact that a free trip, a good deal, a discount code, meant something different to my parents than it meant to most people. Not just a nice bonus, but almost a kind of proof, a validation, evidence that they had been clever enough, patient enough, deserving enough to win something the rest of the world had to pay full price for. I had just never imagined that instinct would ever outweigh something as basic as showing up for my own wedding. 2 months before the ceremony, I called my mother directly and asked her, plainly without any hedging, whether she and my father were coming to the wedding. There was a long silence on the line. "We really wish we could do both," my mother finally said. "But the cruise dates just don't move, Marisol. I'm sorry. We'll make it up to you. We'll visit soon after, and I promise I'll help you go through all the wedding photos when we're back. I'll want to hear every single detail." I sat on my back porch after that call, staring out at the mountains in the distance, and I felt something inside me settle into a strange, quiet clarity. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to move a wedding that dozens of other people had already built their October around, just to compete with a free cruise cabin. I told my mother calmly that I understood, that I hoped they had a wonderful trip, and that the wedding would go on as planned, with or without them. "Don't be like that," my mother said, sounding wounded, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. "We're not choosing the cruise over you, Marisol. We have to be practical sometimes." I didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue about. I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time in the quiet, and then I called Eli's mother, Carol, who had become close to me over the past 3 years in a way that felt easy and warm, entirely unlike the careful, guarded relationship I had with my own mother. I told her what had happened. There was a pause on the line, and then Carol said simply, "Well, that's their loss, sweetheart. And it's about to become our gain if you'll let it." I laughed despite myself, and something in my chest loosened just slightly. In the 2 months leading up to the wedding, I made a decision that surprised even me. I wasn't going to spend that time being angry or trying to change my parents' minds, or performing sadness for anyone who asked. I was going to focus instead on the people who had already shown up over and over across the years that actually mattered. My veterinary school roommate Jules, who flew in from Colorado the moment I told her the date. Eli's parents, Carol and Dennis, who treated me like their own daughter from the very first Thanksgiving I spent with them. My clinic partner, Dr. Osei, who had covered my shifts without a single complaint so I could take time off for planning. And my neighbor Ruth, an 81-year-old widow who had watched my dog every single time I traveled for a conference and who cried actual real tears when I showed her my dress. The morning of the wedding in early October was clear and cool, the kind of Montana fall morning where the air smells like hay and the mountains look close enough to touch. I stood in the small room at the back of the barn where Jules and Carol were helping me get ready, and I looked at myself in the mirror in my dress, and I felt for the first time in months genuinely, fully happy. There were 2 rows of folding chairs at the very front of the ceremony space that had been reserved months earlier for my parents and my brothers. I had left the reserved signs on them until the very last minute, some small, stubborn part of me still hoping. When the ceremony was about to start and those chairs were still empty, my wedding coordinator, a calm and practical woman named Bethany, quietly asked me what I wanted to do. I thought about it for exactly 1 moment. "Fill them," I said. "With the people who are actually here." Bethany nodded and within minutes quietly and efficiently rearranged the front rows. Jules and her husband moved up. Ruth was helped into the front row by Dr. Osei, who insisted on walking slowly at her pace. Carol and Dennis moved forward from where they'd been sitting on the groom's side, and Carol reached over at one point during the vows and squeezed my hand so tightly I nearly laughed out loud in the middle of my own ceremony. The wedding itself was, by every measure that actually matters, perfect. Eli cried during his vows, which surprised absolutely no one who knew him. Ruth gave a toast at the reception that had half the tent laughing and the other half in tears, telling a story about the time I drove 2 hours in a snowstorm to help deliver her neighbor's calf because no other vet in the county would answer the phone that late at night. Dr. Osei danced with his wife to nearly every song. Jules stayed up until 2 in the morning helping me clean up, the same way she used to help me study for exams at 3 in the morning back in veterinary school. That night, exhausted and happy and a little sunburned from the afternoon light, I posted a single photograph to my social media. It was a picture from the ceremony taken from behind the last row of chairs, looking forward toward the arch where Eli and I stood, and in the frame clearly visible were the front rows completely full, every single seat occupied by someone who had shown up. I wrote a short caption underneath it, grateful for every single person who made the trip to be here today. This is what family looks like. I didn't mention my parents at all. I didn't need to. The photo said everything on its own. Every seat full, nobody missing, nothing about it looking like an empty gap anyone needed explained. I turned my phone off that night and didn't look at it again until the following afternoon, when Eli and I were already halfway through our short honeymoon at a cabin 2 hours from home. When I finally turned it back on, I had 11 missed calls from my mother from my father, and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. Here is what had happened as I later pieced it together, and as several mutual family friends were more than happy to explain to me in detail once the whole thing became impossible to hide. My parents had in fact gone on the cruise. And like most people on a cruise, they had spent the week posting about it constantly. Photos of the dining room, photos of the sunset from the pool deck, photos from an excursion in Cozumel where my mother wore a sun hat and held up a drink with a little umbrella in it, smiling wide for the camera. All of this had been posted publicly, visible to anyone who followed either of my parents, which included, as it turned out, a fairly large number of people who also happened to be connected to me. Cousins, family friends, my Aunt Denise's old coworkers, people from our old neighborhood in Phoenix. My wedding photo, posted the same weekend, had started making the rounds among that same overlapping circle of people almost immediately. And it hadn't taken long for someone, my cousin Renata as it turned out, to notice the timing. She commented on one of my mother's cruise photos, innocently at first, asking whether they'd made it back in time for the wedding. When my mother didn't answer the comment directly, Renata, ever the detective, went and looked at the dates on both posts side by side, and then posted her own comment publicly on my mother's cruise photo, laying out the math for anyone scrolling by to see. The wedding and the excursion in Cozumel had happened on the very same afternoon. What followed, from what I understand, was something close to a small social explosion within my extended family's little corner of the internet. Aunts commenting in disbelief. Old family friends sending private messages to my mother asking if it was true. My uncle, my father's own brother, posting a single line underneath the cruise photo that reportedly read, "You missed your daughter's wedding for this?" It stayed up for almost 2 hours before my mother deleted the whole album. By the time Eli and I got back into cell service range the next afternoon, the story had already spread through the extended family faster than any single text message from me ever could have managed. I hadn't accused anyone of anything. I hadn't needed to. I had simply told the truth about my own wedding day, that the seats were full, that I was grateful that this was what family looked like, and let 2 sets of photographs posted on the very same weekend speak for themselves. My mother's voicemails, when I finally listened to them, moved through several different emotional stages, each one a little more frantic than the last. The first, from the morning after the wedding, was still cheerful, oblivious, asking how everything went and saying she couldn't wait to see pictures. The fourth voicemail, left later that same day, had a different tone entirely, sharper, defensive, asking why I hadn't told her people were making a big deal out of the timing, as if I were somehow responsible for the math not working out in her favor. By the 8th voicemail, left the following morning, her voice had cracked into something closer to real distress. "Marisol, please call me back," she said. "This has gotten completely out of hand. People are saying things that aren't fair. We need to talk about this before it gets any worse. I called her back 2 days later, once Eli and I were home and I'd had time to actually sit with everything that had happened, rather than reacting to it in the moment. I'm not calling to fight, I told her before she could start. I just want to understand something. Did you know when you were posting those photos what day it was? There was a long pause. Of course I knew what day it was, my mother said, her voice tight. I didn't think anyone would. I didn't think it would turn into this. Into what exactly? I asked. Into people finding out the truth? Into people judging us, she said. Your father is humiliated, Marisol. Half the family has said something to him about it. Your uncle posted that horrible comment right there for everyone to see. Mom, I said as gently as I could manage, I didn't do that. You did that the moment you chose to go on that cruise instead of coming to my wedding. I didn't post a single word about you. I posted a photo of my own wedding and I said I was grateful for the people who showed up. That's all I did. You knew what would happen, she said. You knew people would compare the dates. I didn't think about the dates at all, I said honestly. I posted a photo of my wedding because it was the happiest day of my life, and every single seat in that front row was full of someone who loves me. That's the whole story, Mom. You're the one who decided that story needed to include a cruise ship. She didn't have an answer for that. We sat in an uncomfortable silence for a moment, the phone line humming faintly between us. What do you want from me, Marisol? She finally asked, and there was something almost pleading in her voice now. What do you want us to do? I don't want anything from you, I said. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm not trying to make this worse. I just needed you to actually understand what happened instead of thinking I did something to you. I didn't. I just told the truth quietly in one photograph, and the truth turned out to be a little inconvenient for the version of the story you'd already decided to believe. 3 days later, my parents showed up at my clinic unannounced, both of them, looking pale and uncertain in a way I had genuinely never seen either of them look before. My father, especially, seemed to have aged in the 2 weeks since the wedding. His shoulders slightly slumped, his eyes tired, none of his usual easy confidence. I stepped outside to talk to them in the small gravel parking lot, between a client's horse trailer and my own truck, because I didn't want whatever conversation was coming to happen in front of my coworkers or my patient's owners. We came to apologize, my father said before I had even fully closed the clinic door behind me. In person. We should have done that from the start instead of calling and texting. I'm sorry, Marisol. We were wrong. We should have been there. We didn't understand how it would look, my mother added quickly. We really didn't think it through. I believe that, I said, and I meant it. I don't think you sat down and decided on purpose to hurt me. I think you got excited about a free trip the way you always do, and you didn't stop to actually think about what missing my wedding would mean. That's almost worse in a way. It means it wasn't even a hard choice for you. It was just easy to pick the cruise. My mother's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair, she started, but my father put a gentle hand on her arm and she stopped. She's right, Denise, he said quietly. It probably was easy. That's the part I've had to sit with the most. We stood there for a moment, none of us saying anything, the sound of a horse shifting its weight in the trailer nearby filling the silence. We have a request, my father finally said, his voice careful, almost nervous, in a way I had genuinely never heard from him before. We know we don't deserve it. But we were hoping, if you'd be willing, that you and Eli might consider doing a small vow renewal sometime down the road. Just something small. So we could actually be there this time. So we could show up the way we should have the first time. I stood in that parking lot for a long moment, turning the question over in my mind. Part of me wanted to say no immediately, out of some old sharp instinct to protect myself from being disappointed by them all over again. But another part of me, a calmer part, thought about what I actually wanted underneath the hurt. And what I wanted was not to punish them forever but to see, honestly, whether they were capable of actually changing or whether this apology was just another version of the easy choice, offered now because the consequences had finally caught up with them. I'm not going to redo my wedding, I told them. That day already happened exactly the way it was supposed to happen with exactly the people who were supposed to be there. I'm not interested in staging a version of it for you now, just because you're embarrassed about how it looked to the rest of the family. My mother's face fell. But, I continued, Eli and I are having a small dinner for our 1-year anniversary next October. Just close family and friends. If you want to come to that, if you actually want to be there not because people are watching but because you genuinely want to be part of our life going forward, you're welcome to come. But I need you to actually show up. Not almost. Not if something better doesn't come along first. My father nodded slowly, and for the first time since they'd arrived, something like real relief passed over his face. We'll be there, he said. I promise you, Marisol. We'll be there. We'd also like to help pay you back, my mother added a little awkwardly, for whatever it cost you not having us there, the caterer or the I don't know. Whatever we can do. You don't need to pay me back for anything, I said. The wedding already happened. It was beautiful. I don't need you to buy your way back into it. I just need you to actually be present next time instead of somewhere else holding a drink with a little umbrella in it. My mother let out a small, surprised laugh at that, half tears and half something lighter, and even my father cracked a small smile despite himself. We talked a little longer in that parking lot, nothing dramatic, just small, careful conversation, the kind that starts to rebuild something slowly instead of trying to force it back together all at once. Before they left, my mother hugged me for a long time, longer than she usually did, and whispered that she was proud of the person I'd become, even if she hadn't shown it the way she should have. I didn't fully believe, standing there in that parking lot, that everything between us was suddenly fixed. I've learned over the years since that it wasn't, not completely, not in some clean, permanent way. My parents still love a good deal, a little more than most people do. My mother still gets a certain gleam in her eye whenever a sweepstakes email lands in her inbox. But they did come to our one-year anniversary dinner the following October. Both of them, no cruise, no excuse, sitting quietly at the small table Eli and I had set up on our back porch, watching the mountains turn orange as the sun went down. My father gave a short, slightly awkward toast that night, the kind a man gives when he isn't naturally good with words but is trying anyway. He talked about the wedding he missed and how sorry he still was about it and how he hoped, given enough time, he could earn back the kind of trust that lets a daughter know without having to wonder that her parents will simply be there. I can't undo the day I missed, he said, raising his glass a little unsteadily. But I can promise you every day after it. It wasn't a perfect toast. It didn't erase the empty chairs at the front of the ceremony, or the 2 weeks I'd spent feeling like an afterthought in my own family's plans. But it was honest, and it was a start, and sometimes I've come to believe a start is worth more than people give it credit for. Ruth still watches my dog whenever I travel and still tells the story of that snowstorm calving at every single family gathering she's invited to, embellishing it a little more each time in a way that makes Eli laugh every single time he hears it. Jules flies in at least once a year no matter how far apart our lives have grown. Carol calls me every Sunday just to check in, the same steady, easy love she's shown me since the very first Thanksgiving I sat awkwardly at her table, unsure if I belonged there yet. I think about that wedding day often, not with anger anymore but with something closer to gratitude. I think about the empty chairs and how quickly, how easily, they filled with people who had never once needed to be convinced to show up. I think about the single photograph I posted that night, not as a weapon, not as some clever trap set to catch my parents in a lie, but simply as the truth. A full front row, nobody missing that actually mattered, and a caption that meant exactly what it said. I've learned since then that you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to accuse anyone of anything, publicly or otherwise, for the truth to eventually find its own way to the surface. Sometimes all you have to do is live your life honestly, celebrate the people who actually show up for you, and let everyone else's own choices speak for themselves in their own time, in their own words, on their own timeline. I've learned that presence is the only currency that really counts in the end. Not gifts, not apologies offered after the fact, not promises to make it up to you later. Just simple, plain presence chosen freely again and again by the people who actually want to be there. And I've learned that setting a boundary doesn't have to mean slamming a door shut forever. Sometimes it just means leaving it open a careful crack and letting the people on the other side decide on their own whether they're finally willing to walk through it. Not because they got caught, not because the story went public, not because staying away had finally become more embarrassing than showing up, but because they actually truly wanted to be part of your life all along. My parents are still not perfect. I don't think they ever fully will be, and I've made a kind of peace with that. But they showed up to that anniversary dinner, and they've shown up to nearly everything since. My 35th birthday, Eli's parents' anniversary party, a small barbecue I hosted last summer for no particular reason at all except that I wanted my whole family, the family I chose and the family I was born into, sitting together at the same table for once. It isn't the relationship I imagined having with them when I was a little girl. But it's real and it's honest, and every single time they show up now, I know it's because they actually chose to, not because a free trip happened to fall on some other week instead. That, in the end, turned out to be worth far more to me than any grand apology or any dramatic confrontation ever could have been. Just the simple, quiet fact of people choosing over and over to be there, which I've come to understand was always the only thing I really wanted from any of them in the first place.